Alright, let's talk about split fiction because this game might be doing something we haven't seen in a long time, not just by bringing back full-blown co-op, or running at a smooth 60 FPS while rendering 2 screens at once, but by proving that yes, games can actually launch in a finished state. No day-one disaster, no performance issues, no half-baked mechanics.
Okay, you better get ready, because I'm about to show you Hazelight's next co-op adventure called Split Fiction. And let me tell you this, get ready for a ride. You play as Mio and Zoe, 2 aspiring writers that hope to get published by a new tech company that can simulate their stories to life.
I can't do this.
Please calm down. It's time. You can't shut. No!
Accidentally, they end up in the same simulation.
What are you doing in my story? Something bad is going on here.
And there, they find out that their stories are about to get stolen.
No one escapes my simulation.
And in order to save them, they have to escape back to reality through the very worlds that they created.
Hands above your heads.
But the thing is, they're strangers, and Mio writes sci-fi, while Zoe writes fantasy. So you will, for every level in the game, jump between a sci-fi world and a fantasy world. We at Hazelight love variation, and you'll have a unique mechanic for every level. Let me give you some examples. In this level, you start out by finding dragon eggs that hatch.
Hey, stop licking.
And then, they become a little bit bigger dragons with new abilities. But in the end, they grow up to be full-ass dragons. And now, you can fly around and kick ass.
In an era where live service often means we'll fix it later, Hazelight is out here saying, nah, we'll just make a good game from the start. But let's get the obvious question out of the way. 2 female protagonists. One writes science fiction, the other writes fantasy. The whole game is built around their personalities clashing and then learning to work together. So is this woke? Is it pushing some kind of agenda? Or is it just hear me out, a good idea for a story? More importantly, does any of that even matter if the game is actually fun? Because from what I've seen, Split Fiction might just be a Game of the Year contender. For you to understand what I'm talking about, we need to rewind time for a bit. It Takes Two is a cooperative action-adventure game developed by Hazelight Studios and directed by Joseph Fares. Released in March 2021, the game is entirely designed around co-op, meaning you must play with another person, either locally or online. It tells the story of Cody and May, a couple on the brink of divorce, who get magically transformed into tiny doll versions of themselves. To return to their normal bodies, they must navigate a series of bizarre imaginative worlds while working together, all under the sometimes annoying guidance of a talking book named Dr. Hakim. It Takes Two was widely praised for its gameplay variety, creative level design, and emotional storytelling. Every level introduces new mechanics, from platforming and puzzle solving to third-person shooting and even Street Fighter-style combat. Critics and players loved how the game constantly reinvented itself, never letting any mechanic overstay its welcome. Commercially, the game was a huge success, selling over 16 million copies, a massive achievement for a purely co-op title. Yes, It Takes Two won Game of the Year at the Game Awards 2021, beating heavy hitters like Resident Evil Village, Metroid Dread Psychonauts, 2 Deathloop, and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. It also won Best Multiplayer Game and Best Family Game at the same event. On top of that, it won Game of the Year at the DICE Game Awards, cementing its status as one of the best co-op games ever made. The game reinforced Hazelight's reputation as the go-to studio for co-op experiences. It also proved that players still crave innovative, story-driven, multiplayer games, not just battle royales or live service titles. Now with Split Fiction on the horizon, the big question is, can Hazelight do it again? Reading Mansour's hands-on preview of Split Fiction got me seriously hyped for this game. The way he described the sheer variety of gameplay, the smooth 60 FPS performance, and how Hazelight is once again redefining co-op, it all just sounds incredible. If you miss those good old days of couch co-op, this is a game to look out for. And honestly, he might be right. Here's what he had to say. Split Fiction is one of those games that sounds way too ambitious for its own good. A co-op adventure where you and a partner constantly switch between different genres, mechanics, and even art styles. That's usually a recipe for disaster. Games that try to do everything at once tend to collapse under their own weight. Either they spread themselves too thin, or the mechanics feel half-baked. But after playing 3 hours of it, I can't shake the feeling that Hazelight might actually pull this off. The setup alone is already way more interesting than most co-op games. You play as two authors, Mio and Zoe, who couldn't be more different. Mio is all about hard sci-fi, logic, and skepticism, while Zoe lives and breathes fantasy, magic, and optimism. The game kicks off when they both try to land a publishing deal at Raider Publishing, only to find themselves trapped inside a machine that quite literally pulls them into their own stories. But this isn't just some creative writing exercise. James Raider, the guy behind the company, is using this simulation to steal their ideas. Things go wrong fast. Mio and Zoe get stuck together, and the only way out is to jump from one fractured story to the next. It's a perfect setup for a game that's constantly shifting. 1 second, you're cyber ninjas running on walls and whipping objects across the room. The next, you're rolling around as a pinball with gravity-based abilities. Then you're flying a fart-powered pig. Then you're shape-shifting between a fairy and a humanoid tree in order to solve puzzles. The game isn't just throwing in different mechanics. It's fully committing to them, and somehow they all feel equally polished. I played for 3 hours and ran through at least 10 different levels, including side missions. Given that the full game is supposed to be around 12 to 14 hours long, that's an insane amount of variety. And it's not just about different playstyles. The game constantly changes how it looks and feels, too. One moment you're in a futuristic cyberpunk city, then you're in a fantasy world with giant dragons, then suddenly you're in what looks like a pixelated 1980s side-scroller. The closest thing I can compare it to is Everything Everywhere All at Once, but even that doesn't fully capture what's going on here. The biggest surprise is that it all works. Games that throw in this much variety usually struggle with balance. Either one mechanic feels way better than the others, or certain levels end up dragging because they overstay their welcome. But so far, Split Fiction doesn't seem to have that problem. Every section feels like its own fully realized idea, and because you're constantly jumping between different gameplay styles, nothing ever gets old. And that's not even touching on the co-op aspect, which is where Hazelight really shines. If you've played A Way Out or It Takes Two, you know they don't just throw in a second player for the sake of it. They design their games around teamwork. That's exactly what's happening here. You're not just running around together, you actually have to rely on each other. One level had me controlling a dragon while my partner had to guide me through obstacles. Another had us solving a puzzle where I needed to shapeshift at the exact same time my partner used an ability to move an object. It's the kind of co-op where you don't just feel like you're playing alongside someone, you feel like you're actually working together. There were even moments where we got stuck, but not in a frustrating way. In one level, my partner and I couldn't figure out why his dragon wasn't flying. Turns out he had to jump off a ledge first, which we didn't realize for a solid 2 minutes. We both felt ridiculous once we figured it out and then immediately saw other players get stuck in the same exact spot. But that's part of what makes a game like this fun. It's not just about mechanics or story, but about shared moments where both players feel like they've actually figured something out together. That's another thing that makes Split Fiction stand out. A lot of co-op games treat teamwork like an afterthought, more of a way to make things easier rather than something the game is actually built around. But here, co-op is the entire point. It's not just Mio and Zoe learning to work together, it's the players, too. That said, I can't help but wonder if the full game can actually maintain this level of quality. It's easy for a game like this to impress in short bursts, but what happens when you're 10 hours in? Does it still feel fresh, or does the constant shifting start to wear thin? Joseph Fares has already teased that the game's ending will be something that's never been done before, but that's a bold claim. Can Split Fiction actually deliver on everything it's setting up, or is this another case of a game flying too close to the sun? Split Fiction is fully locked in at 60 FPS on consoles, which is a big deal when you consider how this game is built. Co-op games always come with technical challenges, but this one, it has to render 2 screens at once, meaning double the workload, double the processing power needed, and double the potential for things to go wrong. But according to Joseph Ferris, they pulled it off. That's good news for anyone who's been waiting for a game like this. There will be some extra bells and whistles for PS5 Pro players, but nothing game-changing. According to Ferris, the difference isn't huge, just some major improvements here and there. Either way, console players should have a smooth experience when Split Fiction launches on March 6th. And while Hazelight is all in on co-op right now, Ferris made an interesting comment. Co-op isn't necessarily the future of the studio. It's a big part of their DNA, sure, but they're not locking themselves into it forever. They're already working on their next game, and as he put it, fans should expect some crazy shit.